Where's the beef? Poll places Vance and Harris atop for 2028. The human and taxpayer cost from the global war on terror, a new license plate camera database, the growing national debt, and so much more. Welcome to the States, powered by the Center Square. It's Monday, August 24th, 2026, and I'm your host, Greg Bishop. The Trump administration is temporarily lifting the tariff on beef to help lower prices for Americans at the grocery store. Friday, President Donald Trump announced for the next 90 days, the U.S. would allow 300,000 metric tons of beef, committing that the beef will be sold at 25% below current market prices. The Center Square reporter Morgan Sweeney reports the move has spurred adverse reactions from cattle ranchers and lawmakers from more rural states. Critics have said it would likely reduce prices much anyways, since, as the New York Times reported, more than 80% of beef consumed in the U.S. is produced on American soil, and it's historically smaller herds that more directly contribute to higher prices. Now, direct-to-consumer meat delivery company Good Ranchers, which sells only American beef, responded to the news on social media, saying that under beef prices, it's currently a problem, adding that real pressures are being put on American families. But they said that flooding the market with imported ground beef for 3 months is not a solution for ranchers and more of a temporary Band-Aid. But here's the president Friday at Joint Base Andrews responding to reporters.
Your move on beef imports is upsetting some ranchers, as well as some Republicans are asking you to delay that move on imports.
Well, we want to get the beef prices down, so we'll get them down a little bit. And that's what people want. That's what the voters want. And that's what I want. The ranchers are great. They're my people. I love the ranchers. They've done a fantastic job. But they admit that we need a little help and in order to get the prices down. So that's what we're doing.
Now, a report in February from the American Farm Bureau Federation noted that the American cattle herd is at 75-year lows. Others, like conservative commentator and health and wellness podcaster Alex Clark, have questioned how the president's decision reflects on American first ethos, as well as suggesting other potential reforms that would help bring down the cost of American beef. Now, the White House has said the president will sign an executive order temporarily limiting the beef tariff within the next coming weeks. Could the next presidential election be between two vice presidents? While we still have a general midterm election to get through this November, there's still a ton of attention on the 2028 presidential cycle. To get more into the latest from the Center Square's Voters Voice poll, let's talk with Mike Noble of Noble Predictive Insights. Mike, before we get to the outcome of what you guys found from the most recent poll, let's talk about what sets this poll apart from all the other polls that are out there.
There's a couple of things that set this poll apart, Greg, is that first off is that it has a large sample size, so roughly 2,500 registered voters from across the country, making sure we have the right combinations of, the key demographic groups, gender, age, educational attainment. So again, making sure it's represented. The second thing is that it has the largest sample size in the country of true independent voters. So true independents are those that don't lean Republican or Democrat. They're your true middle-of-the-road voters that ultimately decide a lot of these close elections.
And this is also a poll that has been conducted every 3 months or so. The most recent one, 2,500 voters that you have chosen to poll between August 12th and 16th. Why is this so important that it's pretty recent?
Yeah, no, it's fresh polling, so new perspectives. And so when we look at least the state of the electorate right now, how are people thinking and feeling as we're heading up to these midterm elections? Right now, they're pretty sour, frankly, on the current mood. The national mood is sour in that it's creating kind of a modest Democratic advantage heading into these midterm elections. But the thing is nowhere close to settled. Right now, we get to see that there's a 60% wrong track. So 60% think the country's going the wrong direction. Only 30% think we're on the right track. The Democrats have about a 5-point edge in the generic ballot, and then which is up from +1 in March. Now it's +5 now. And then Trump's job approval is in the low 40s right now on his economic and overall approval rating. So, and then the true independents, 52% are still unsure. So basically Democrats have the edge today, but they don't have the race in the bag. And more than
we'll see
half
exactly what happens come November, no question about it. Mike, let's talk about what could happen in 2028, though. You've got the most recent polling. Let's look at Republicans. JD Vance at top. What does the rest of the field look like?
Yeah. So Vance isn't merely, leading the Republican field. He's right now occupying a different tier than everybody else. So he's at roughly 41%. The election were today, but Rubio is in a close, or is the closest one behind him at 18% right now, but nobody else is above 6%. So really it's between Vance and Rubio. Everybody else is just noise.
And you look at all the other names that are on that list that you guys asked about, and you've got the likes of Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and several others. But like you said, nobody else goes over that 6% threshold. Some only getting 1 or 2%. So when we get to 2028, and I guess a question for this particular poll is how much has that changed since the last time you guys talked about this?
I mean, compared to the last time we talked about it, is that Rubio wasn't probably doing as well, I think, early on in the year. But then, JD Vance started slipping a little bit, and Rubio kind of his stock went up. But then we saw recently that, Vance, he kind of has come back into Republican voters' good graces. So in Trump world, it's very fluid on who can be rising and who can be falling at any given time.
No question. And now let's look at the other side of the ticket there, the Democrats. Again, we still got 2026 to get through in the midterms and who controls Congress. Very much a solid question that you guys are tapping into as well. But so much interest in what's going to happen in 2028. What does that look like, and what changed from the last time you guys polled the Democrats?
No, what's kind of interesting about this right now is that Harris is still starting in first place. So she's at 28% of Democrats, again, but not as big as, let's say, Vance on the other side of the aisle at 41%. Newsom is then farther behind at second at 14%, and Buttigieg at 12%, but AOC 7%, and you have 15% unsure. But Harris, starting that first place position, but unlike Vance on the Republican side, she doesn't have anything resembling a dominant position. And so the Democratic field looks genuinely open. And that's what you can really say, that they got their clock cleaned so hard in 2024 that they just really still haven't figured out who they are, and no one's really come out as really a strong dominant force in the Democratic Party.
Let's talk a little bit about the demographics here. How does that spread out? Age, gender? Does this show up in the polling as to favoring one candidate or the other over, either the Republicans or the Democrats' silos?
Probably the biggest demographic breakout is probably on the Democratic side, actually. Harris is doing great with 18 to 29-year-old Democrats, also with African Americans, but only, she's only holding at 13% among 65 and older. Compared to 18 to 29, she's at 47%. So basically with the very younger wing of the party, she's doing better, but especially with the older wing, you just see some deep divides there. And again, it just shows that the Democratic Party is kind of in this bit of they're going to go through a bit of a restructuring phase, just like the Republicans did, but it's just taking them a little bit longer.
It's something we're going to see play out in the November election. Obviously, we've been talking about the 2028 presidential election, but plenty of other things that Noble Predictive Insights polled for the Voters Voice poll at thecentersquare.com. Mike, we've got a lot of different polling stories that are going to be coming out. Give us a little bit of a sample of some of the things that we can expect coming out here soon.
There's a bunch of big stories. I mean, one of the unique things we asked is, what do people hear about most during, any given week? Like what's kind of top of mind, or what are they seeing in the news cycle? They said, a lot of the headlines are about the war, but when it comes to the issues they're most concerned about, their votes are still about the wallets. So this election is very much going to be about the economy. It's the economy, stupid, as you've heard, probably in past elections, but this could be more true right now. Also, a couple other, interesting topics is that healthcare transparency. We touched on that topic, talking about healthcare disclosure and some of those items. And then, data centers, which has been a hot button issue, has some really interesting insights when it comes to data centers, whether, are they popular? Should they be put in people's communities? What are the issues that they have with it? And then also, I think, using AI, like which way to use AI. A lot of people are kind of negative about AI in general, but we found is that given different purposes it's used for, voters have more of an affinity to support it. So we have some on that as well. And then, of course, a little bit more about abortion pills and anti-Semitism and socialism we talked about. So anyways, we got into a lot of really great hot button issues, and I think voters are going to be really, your listeners are going to be very interested to see about, what these results are, because it's all the things that have been talked about right now, and we have answers for it.
Now, again, a lot of different things people are going to be able to tap into. Get the newsletter in your inbox. Go to thecentersquare.com. Sign up for free today and get the latest on those stories. Mike, when is the next poll? Because, I mean, you guys seem to have been doing this every few months here to give us kind of that trajectory of, what we're expecting heading into November, what to expect after the election. What does it look like?
Yeah, no, it's funny. We've done a few already this year. The tempo has sped up, but I think we're going to probably do another one in about a month or so. So we'll probably get one in before we head into October, ideally. So probably end of September would probably be the goal. And then we'll probably have one after the election as well. So kind of a post-mortem after all the dust is settled. We can get some questions to, whatever happened on election day, we can dig in more to get those answers. But yeah, probably in the next month, we'll probably have some more polling out.
We're very much looking forward to that. Mike Noble of Noble Predictive Insights, thank you so much for taking time with us here on The States. We'll be right back with more. Approaching the 25-year anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, an entire generation of young Americans are alive who were born after September 11th and have only known war. Now, but the true costs, something they may not know. Welcome back to the States. After the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, President George W. Bush launched the global war on terror with the goal to destroy Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and other terrorist organizations. Now, that global war on terror, again, after the 9/11 2001 attacks, you have multiple different operations that were launched. October 7th of 2001, Operation Enduring Freedom was launched in Afghanistan. In 2003, March 20th, Operation Iraqi Freedom was launched. In January of 2007, Operation New Dawn launched, and August 8th of 2014, Operation Freedom's Sentinel and Operation Inherent Resolve were launched. Now, over the past 25 years, U.S. presidents have sent hundreds of thousands of young men and women to fight in conflicts overseas. Congress authorized funding, pushing Americans further into debt. The Center Square contributor Bethany Blankley reports post-9/11 conflicts have cost Americans nearly $10 trillion, including $1 billion on interest on debt to fund the Iraq and Afghanistan wars alone. Now, nearly 1 million people were directly killed in post-9/11 conflicts from 2001 to 2021, according to new analysis published by Brown University's Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs. They include U.S. military service members, Department of Defense civilians and contractors, U.S. military police, allied troops, opposition fighters, journalists, and humanitarian workers. The greatest number of U.S. deaths occurred in Iraq and Afghanistan, with casualties since September 11th, 2001 to September 1st of 2021. Iraq, over 4,600 U.S. military members, 3,600 contractors, with 32,700 wounded. Again, in Afghanistan, 2,400 U.S. military members lost their lives, 3,900 contractors, with 21,000 people being wounded. Now, U.S. military members, DoD personnel, and contractor casualties totaled nearly 15,000 from September 11th, 2001 to September 1st of 2021. Now, the overwhelming majority of U.S. military members killed and wounded in these wars were white men under age 25 in the U.S. Army. Now, again, breaking this down a little bit further, in Iraq, a total of 8,281 U.S. casualties. U.S. troops remained in Iraq until December 15th, 2011. In Afghanistan, again, where there was over 6,300 U.S. casualties, U.S. military combat operations ended there on December 31st, 2014. But U.S. troops remained in the country until August 30th, 2021. After the U.S. fought Al-Qaeda and the Taliban for 20 years, the Biden administration withdrew U.S. troops 5 years ago this August. He left $7 billion worth of U.S. military equipment behind and returned control of Afghanistan to the Taliban. 13 service members were killed during that withdrawal. Another area impacting veterans is high suicide rates among the veteran population. At least 4 times as many active duty U.S. military members and veterans of post 9/11 wars committed suicide than U.S. military members who died in combat. What about the ongoing conflict in Iran? Well, data shows U.S. military casualties and 279 military members added to those 4 U.S. casualties in action for overseas operations that began July 7th, and 14 U.S. military casualties and 418 military members wounded in action in the Iran conflict. Now, Operation Epic Fury, as of August 18th, and that's the total cost there. Now, with the human cost front and center, the taxpayer cost cannot be ignored. 25 years later, and the cost to taxpayers for that U.S. war on terror is approaching $10 trillion. Initial costs for 2 conflicts in Iran and Afghanistan, more than $8 trillion. Then you have an additional $2 trillion being incurred by the U.S. military spending after the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attack against Israel and conflicts in Yemen and Iran. So again, the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, more than $8 trillion, and that comes from $5.8 trillion in appropriations from Congress, with $2.2 trillion for ongoing veteran care. Data published by Brown University's Watson School of International and Public Affairs broke down spending by federal agency for the conflicts between 2001 and 2022, and it includes more than $2 billion initially spent by the Department of Defense, with another $884 billion in increases. It also includes more than $189 billion spent by the State Department, more than $1.1 billion spent by the Department of Homeland Security, and more than $465 billion spent on veteran care. During the 21 years analyzed, interest on federal borrowing to fund these wars exceeded $1 billion. The estimated cost of caring for post 9/11 veterans dealing with physical and mental issues is expected to reach $2.5 trillion by 2050, according to that Brown analysis. Now, the report refers to the war on terror as credit card wars. It says by 2030, the U.S. will have spent as much on interest payments as it did on overseas contingency operations for the wars themselves, over $2 trillion. It also highlights perpetual spending on military contractors, big tech, and weapons companies, noting that 30 to 40% of spending on contractors is lost to waste, fraud, and abuse. Since October 7th, 2023, Hamas terrorist attacks against Israel, the war on terror costs the U.S. taxpayers has skyrocketed. Within 2 years, the U.S. government has spent nearly $34 billion in the form of military aid to Israel and in military operations in Yemen, according to Brown analysis. Again, in February, in the first few days of the U.S.-Israel war against Iran, the Pentagon said munitions cost $11.3 billion. The Harvard analysis puts the total cost closer to $16 billion, with the ongoing conflict costing American taxpayers $2 billion a day. A Center for Strategic and International Studies analysis questions Pentagon budget data. It notes the Office of Management and Budget often disagrees with federal agencies about what to include when reporting total budget costs. It also estimates the cost to replace equipment, infrastructure damage, loss of ammunition, and replace plane inventories is nearly $2 billion. In June, OMB Director Russell Vought, he requested another $87.6 billion from Congress to support the ongoing Iran conflict, including $17 billion for operational costs. Now, in June, both houses of Congress, they passed war powers resolutions directing the president to withdraw troops from the Iranian conflict. Secretary of State Marco Rubio maintains the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. Multiple polls conducted in March and June and July indicate that nearly 60% of Americans polled, they oppose U.S. military intervention in Iran. But what do you think about all of these costs? Be sure to leave a comment below. We'll be right back with more here from the States.
there are these privacy and civil liberties concerns and things like that. And it's kind of abstract, but we wanted to really remind people that this isn't an abstraction. There are real people being harmed by these devices every day.
That was Institute for Justice investigative researcher Christopher Ingram on what their recently revealed database of advanced license plate reading camera abuse from across the country is all about. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Joining us to talk about this new database and the ongoing reaction to ALPRs is the Center Square Associate Editor, Kim Jarrett. Kim, thanks for taking time with us here on the States. So what is all in this database?
There's a lot in this database. You're going to find 170 cases as of today. They're updating this daily. So every time there's an officer arrested or there's a report of abuse, it's going to be updated. I think it was 158 cases at the time I interviewed Christopher, and I think that was last Thursday. Some of these cases are very interesting. You've got police officers in Fayetteville, Georgia, basically using this database like Google. They were looking at family members, looking at data that's held on themselves and friends. You also have police officers who are stalking romantic partners. And there's also some cases of abuse where the data was wrong and there were people held at gunpoint because their license plate was mistakenly read. So there's a lot of information in this database.
It's incredible the stories you're seeing pop up all over the place. Obviously, as you mentioned, people being stopped by multiple law enforcement and having firearms drawn on them because a license plate had an O instead of a 0 or something to that effect. You see these types of things happening. And of course, we've recently seen some statements from Flock to try to settle some of these concerns that are popping up across the country. But you talked with Christopher about what sets these particular ALPR cameras apart from other different types of cameras like red light cameras or speed cameras. Here's what he had to say.
They are on all the time. They are not just capturing violators. They are capturing the information of every single person who drives past them. And many of these cities, these police departments, they want a heavy saturation of these cameras. They like to be able to see what's going on in the city. And so when you have this density of these cameras, they can effectively see where a person is going throughout the day.
Kim, do people understand what these cameras are and how law enforcement's using them?
Yeah, that's a really good question because you hear the good stories from law enforcement. Everyone wants to capture criminals. We want to find abducted children. That's the case of what the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation says. Hey, these cameras are great because there was a 1-year-old abducted from Tennessee. We used a camera and we were able to find this child in Georgia. So they're seeing a lot of the good part, but now we're also hearing more because this is still kind of new technology about, oh my goodness, you read my license plate wrong, or are you watching me all the time? Is this a case of Big Brother watching me? So people are just really now in the past year or so going, oh my goodness, what is this camera doing? Is this a camera that's watching me? Is this a camera that's not? And in the recent 6 months or so, now we're hearing that law enforcement is abusing the cameras.
Yeah, and a lot of different stories popping up. Again, that's what this database from the Institute for Justice is highlighting with seemingly daily updates. But as you mentioned, I mean, the concern seems to be kind of this mass surveillance where, everybody who's driving by these cameras, and these cameras aren't just set up in one location. They're set up in places all throughout. I don't know where exactly you are in the South. I'm in Illinois, and they're up all over the place. So if I leave my little village, I get captured by a license plate reading camera. If I get into the capital city, I'm captured at a different intersection. So it kind of knows that there's some legitimate concerns there.
Yes, I'm in Southeast Tennessee. I cover Tennessee and Georgia. I travel quite a bit. We were in Middle Georgia a few weeks ago, and I think I mentioned to you that there were cameras everywhere, and I was singing the tune Old MacDonald in my head. Here's a camera, there's a camera, everywhere there's a camera. I think every half mile or so as we were driving in one of these larger towns in Middle Georgia, we were seeing a flock camera. Again, there's the two different sides of it. We're capturing criminals, legitimate criminals, but we're also the private citizen who is doing nothing wrong. We're getting their information too. And how is that data being used? That's a big question.
Yeah, you mentioned Georgia, but this database from the Institute for Justice seems to highlight a lot of different Georgia cases. What gives?
Well, Georgia is the home of Flock Safety. There's a lot of manufacturers of these license plate readers. Flock Safety has had the most publicity lately. They are headquartered in Atlanta. They rolled out some new accountability measures. And according to Christopher, they probably started those in Georgia. So that's why in the past week, we have seen so many new cases of police officers getting caught, as I said earlier, using them as their personal Google to look up romantic partners or look up family members. So that's probably why we're seeing more in Georgia at this time.
It's pretty fascinating. Now, just this morning, the debate continues, and kind of sticking in Georgia, you had a state senator there release a pretty lengthy statement about these particular, advanced license plate reading cameras and the technology behind it. What did you get from John Albers?
So John Albers, he's head of the Senate Public Safety Committee. He noted, yes, these are good tools for law enforcement. He is pro-law enforcement. So he says this is good, but we cannot ignore the privacy concerns. So he is encouraging law enforcement, let's kind of work together in kind of a task force kind of situation. Take a look at these privacy issues and see how we can address them.
And he went on to say that, quote, we must preserve the legitimate investigative value of these systems while preserving and preventing abuse. Now, he says public safety and privacy are complementary responsibilities of good government, and responsible oversight of these cameras ensures that we do not have to sacrifice one to achieve the other. He also went on to quote Benjamin Franklin saying, quote, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Kim, what does that mean, though, for Georgia?
So let's talk about a little bit about what's next. The Atlanta Police Department, they are reviewing their use of these cameras. About a 30-day review, they issued a statement. Other cities and counties across the states that I cover, Tennessee and Georgia and the Southeast and across the country, we've run several stories here on the Center Square about communities who are reconsidering flock cameras and what their policies need to be. Flock itself, they announced that they're only going to retain the data now for 7 days instead of the 30 days that was originally there. They've also instituted these accountability measures. And again, that's why we believe that Georgia is seeing so many police officer arrests in just the past couple of weeks, because there's some accountability and they're able to find that these officers are misusing these cameras and the readers.
Yeah, and that's one thing that the Flock itself recently said as early as late last week that, we wouldn't know about these abuses if it wasn't for Flock having the tools in place to do these audit logs. And now they're enforcing this with automatic audit logs, and they're reducing the recommended date of how many days they have to keep this information in a database. So they're definitely being pretty responsive here. But one question you asked Christopher Ingram from the Institute for Justice, which has this database of Flock or ALPR alleged abuses with reports popping up all across the country. You asked him in particular, are these effective for law enforcement? Here's what he had to say.
We don't know. We often see stories, police departments like to publicize stories of, they'll say, oh, a flock camera was used in the investigation against a theft or a sex offender or whatever. The thing is, in most police investigations, they're gathering many, many pieces of evidence, right? They want the flock data, they have witness testimony, they have security footage from a private business. There are gathering many streams of data. And so the thing that I get concerned about is, our law enforcement agencies crediting a camera with the entire case when it's really just one small piece of a case.
And we seem to see this happen quite a bit when it comes to announcements of an arrest. I mean, we had a federal prosecutor out of New York highlight flock cameras as necessary to fight law enforcement when announcing the arrest of a terror suspect. And when asked by a reporter, this was just last week, if Flock was used in that arrest, and he said he doesn't think so, but he still mentioned it as a possibility of crime fighting. Kim, there's another element to this as well. We've seen some law enforcement out there show a camera that's been vandalized to some degree. How big of an issue is that for law enforcement?
When we had the Lumpkin County, Georgia sheriff, he's offering $1,000 reward because there was a camera near a school that was vandalized. And I did reach out to him for an interview, and he just wasn't available at the time. And I still would like to talk to him because he says, hey, this helps us capture sex offenders who might be near a school, because Georgia has a law that sex offenders can't be, I think, within 500 to 1,000 feet of a school. So he says, hey, these cameras are helping us keep sex offenders away. And if you abuse it, you're taking away, he says, an important tool for law enforcement.
We'll be watching this story as it continues to develop, because I don't think these cameras are going to go anywhere anytime soon. Kim Jarrett, associate editor for the Center Square. Greatly appreciate you taking the time here. And for more like this, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube to get the very latest from the states and the Center Square. We'll be right back with more.
The United States currently owes roughly $39 trillion for its explicit obligations, such as U.S. Treasury bonds. But what's worse is for its implicit obligations, such as payments owed by law to Social Security and Medicare recipients. America owes well over $65 trillion.
That was Missouri Republican U.S. Representative Eric Burleson in May, talking about the national debt and its impacts. And since then, the national debt has now grown to over $40 trillion and is growing. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Now, back in May, Burleson talked about the dangers of letting the national debt get out of control.
We have known for decades that our national debt is too high, and it presents a danger to the security of future generations. But alarmingly, rather than change our ways, we have a problem. In recent years, has shifted federal spending into overdrive. As a result, the United States' explicit debt has grown by over 42% since the months just before COVID-19 pandemic hit, driven by out-of-control deficit spending. We are now paying more in interest on our national debt than we are spending on our national defense.
He said experts estimate in the next few years, as little as 5, interest payments on the debt could be the single largest item in the federal budget. And America's debt and deficits, he said, threatens national economic security, national security, and the prosperity of future generations. As for the interest, he said that puts pressure on business interest rates, too. Because he said when the government takes on debt, it's competing against individuals and businesses who also need to take out debt.
The affordability of Americans' daily lives is in jeopardy, and the nation's flexibility to spend as much as may be needed to meet military and societal challenges is a challenge.
Now, one possible option to control some of the debt increase has been floated in the past in Congress, but that Republican bill to force spending cuts alongside any debt limit increase has been introduced in 6 of the 7 Congresses since 2013 and has never once been brought up for a vote. Now, the Center Square reporter Brett Rowland, he tells us when the first bill appeared in 2013, the national debt stood near $16 trillion. It has since more than doubled. Just last week, hitting more than $40 trillion. Now, interest on the debt runs more than $1 trillion a year, the government's third largest spending category, behind only Social Security and Medicare, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Now, all 3 major credit rating agencies have downgraded the U.S. from their top rating. The measure meant to address that keeps returning and keeps going nowhere. The idea is pretty straightforward. Any increase in the debt limit must be matched by an equal cut in projected spending. U.S. Senator Rob Portman, an Ohio Republican, first introduced the dollar-for-dollar Deficit Reduction Act in 2013 when it drew 29 co-sponsors, including much of the party's leadership at that time. He also referred to it the year after as an amendment to a debt limit bill, and the Senate voted on that bill 54 to 44. He failed to get that standalone bill until he filed it again in 2015, 2017, and 2019. Now, each time it drew fewer co-sponsors, 11, then 5, then 4. Each time it was referred to committee and never seen again. The bill disappeared in Congress that followed, but it returned in 2023 when state U.S. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, he introduced a Senate version, and Representative Randy Feenstra, he of Iowa, he filed a House companion to that bill. Barrasso introduced the Senate bill again in March, and Representative Greg Steube, he brought a new House version just this month. Barrasso's Senate bill has 2 co-sponsors. You have one from Wyoming and one from Pennsylvania. The House version has none. Barrasso and Steube cast the bill as a basic discipline. They said Congress cannot keep raising the credit limits on American people without cutting that credit card. Now, that's something that, of course, is drawing more concerns and questions, and Barrasso framed it as a check on the Democrats' out-of-control spending spree. But the National Taxpayers Union, they endorsed the measure, calling it a much-needed common-sense reform. The measure's enforcement rests on a point of order, a procedural objection any member can raise that can be waived in the Senate with 60 votes and in the House by a majority. Now, Congress has a long record of establishing such rules and then setting them aside. It's repeatedly waived or reset the pay-as-you-go rules and the spending caps imposed by the 2011 Budget Control Act. Romana Boucha, a budget expert at the Cato Institute, said the waivable point of order, quote, isn't meaningless, but it isn't a fiscal straitjacket either. Its value, she said, is enforcing lawmakers to make a sensible choice to waive the rule. But, she said, the bill aims at the wrong target. She said dollar for dollar doesn't cut it. What matters, she said, is putting the debt on a sustainable path, not offsetting a single increase. The measure's never advanced in any Congress under either party. And she said the obstacle isn't a lack of clever budget rules. She said it's Congress's unwillingness to abide by them. Now, Barrasso's and Steube's offices did not respond to questions about why their bill has never received a vote or what has changed in Congress. The office of U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, the ranking Democrat on the Budget Committee, also did not respond to the center square. Now, Boucha, out of the Cato Institute, said a debt limit deal could impose real discipline if it tied borrowing to a credible plan to stabilize the debt as a share of the economy rather than matching a single increase dollar for dollar. She pointed to a cap on annual deficits of 3% of gross domestic product paired with an independent commission to overhaul the biggest drivers of the debt, federal health care and retirement programs. For now, the standalone bill sits where it has for more than a decade. Introduced, referred to committee, and waiting for the floor votes it has never received. Be sure to follow us here on YouTube for more and get that newsletter in your inbox at thecentersquare.com. We'll be right back with more here from the States. Welcome back to the States. Now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country you can find in the description below or in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter at thecentersquare.com. In Illinois, former Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson died Sunday while serving a 20-year prison sentence for the July 2024 killing of Sonia Massey, a Springfield woman, in her home. The Center Square Illinois reporter Sean Reed reports Grayson was found guilty of second-degree murder by an Illinois jury in October for shooting and killing the unarmed Massey in her home. The former deputy was diagnosed with colon cancer prior to the shooting, which his lawyer said upon his sentencing hearing in January had advanced to stage 4 and spread to both his liver and lungs. One of Grayson's defense lawyers, Daniel Foltz, confirmed to the Center Square Sunday evening that he died earlier in the day at the age of 32. The Illinois Department of Corrections hasn't disclosed in what facility he was serving his sentence. A Georgia House committee studying the state's transportation costs heard what other states have. The cost to build and repair roads has skyrocketed since 2020. The Center Square Associate Editor Kim Jarrett reports asphalt resurfacing costs rose 42% from calendar year 2020 to 2025. Interstate asphalt resurfacing costs are up 62%. A civil engineer for the Georgia Department of Transportation told that to a House Blue Ribbon Study Committee of Transportation Infrastructure and Vehicle Regulation late last week. The cost of concrete drainage, storm pipes, that increased as well, 127% from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2026, while the cost of inlet structures increased by 196%. The National Highway Construction Cost Index shows highway construction costs have grown by 70% since 2021. Indexing the same data with the state budget shows a 66% increase for Georgia. Now, the suspension of the fuel tax from March to May in Georgia further drained fuel tax collections. Collections in May were $196.6 million lower in Georgia when compared to last year, which is attributed to that suspension approved by state legislators and by Governor Brian Kemp. After a hearing in the case last week, the ruling's expected soon that could impact California redistricting. The Center Square California reporter Madeline Shannon reports the case was actually involved two lawsuits over the November 2025 redistricting election in the Golden State. They were consolidated in recent months. Now, plaintiffs argue California's redistricting constitutes a racial gerrymandering, which is illegal. Defendants say the newly drawn electoral maps are a politically partisan gerrymander, which is legal. One case, this heard in federal district court in December of 2025, as reported by the Center Square. In the court proceedings for that particular lawsuit, lawyers representing the plaintiff said the electoral maps approved by California voters during the November 2025 special election were illegal. The map undermines the Voting Rights Act of 1965, according to that argument. The other case is Noyes versus Newsom. Expect to see some ruling on this issue soon. And U.S. Senator Darlene Graham, sister of Lindsey Graham, carries the endorsement of second-term President Donald Trump against U.S. Representative Ralph Northam in South Carolina's U.S. Senate's Republican primary runoff Tuesday. The Center Square managing editor Alan Wooten reports Graham also has the backing of U.S. Senator Tim Scott and U.S. Representative Russell Fry, the third-place finisher 2 weeks ago. Greenville County, the most populous and heavily contributor to the primaries of that party, it was won by Norman. Now, the special election became necessary when Lindsey Graham died July 11th. The governor appointed Darlene Graham to fulfill the remainder of the term in the 119th Congress that ends the 1st of July, and she decided to seek the 6-year term by succeeding her brother on November 3rd. Now, from a crowded field, and after a failed run for governor in June, Norman emerged second to Graham in the primary 2 weeks ago. Without achieving 50% plus one of the votes, a runoff was necessary. Early in-person voting ended Saturday. And that's just some of what America is talking about. You can get these and other headlines at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and join us back here Tuesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from across the country, only with the states, powered by the Center Square.